Welcome to Weathersfield Proctor Library Storytime. I'm Glenna Coleman, Youth Services Librarian, and here's our Library Bear with a couple of more stories for you today. Well, these stories are about they have a food theme to them, but the food doesn't exactly turn out the way people expect. I'd have to say it's a little unexpected, wouldn't you? Yeah. Well, the first story that I have for you is called Lousy, Rotten, Stinkin Grapes. This is by Margie Palatini, and it's illustrated by Barry Moser. Now, for those of you who recognize Fox and Grapes, you'll know that the original story was a tale by Aesop. But this is a wonderful retelling of that story. Lousy, Rotten, Stinkin Grapes by Margie Palatini. Alright, let's see if we can get rid of the glare. Get a little comfortable here so I can see the words and the pictures. We're still getting glare, aren't we? Well, it's shiny pictures. All right, here we go. Fox eyed a bunch of tantalizing grapes hanging from a vine growing high on a tree. "Those juicy morsels are for me," he said with a grin. The problem was, Fox was only so high, and the grapes were so high. "No matter," he said. "I am sly, clever, smart. After all, I am a fox." He made a plan. Add this to that, multiply that to this, subtract here from there, carry the 2, minus the 1, and voila! Grapes. Hop, skip, jump, flying leap, and no grapes. Fox climbed from the thicket and brushed off his coat. Perhaps a bit of a boost is needed. But where to get a boost? Grunt, grunt, grunt. Fox turned. He grinned. "Why, Bear, old buddy. I say, do you like grapes?" "Grapes?" said Bear. Do I? I think I do. Yep, I do." Sorry, Bear, no reflection on you at all. Excellent. Listen. Look and listen. "Here's the plan," explained Fox. "You stand here. I will stand on your head. There. On the count of 3, give a bit of a boost, and voila, grapes." Bear looked at the plan. He looked at the grapes. He looked at the tree. He stared at his big front paws and thought, do you know there, Fox, I'm thinking maybe I could just wrap my paws." Ta, interrupted Fox. Bear, my dear dim buddy. Your job is brawn, not brain. You leave the thinking to me. After all, I'm the fox. Sly, clever, smart. I know how to get grapes." Bear shrugged. "If you say so." I don't know if we can get rid of that glare. Maybe that's a little better. Bear stood here. Fox climbed up and stood on top of Bear's head. There. Fox counted. 1, 2, 3, and no grapes. Fox brushed off his coat and straightened his nose. Maybe a little more lift, thrust, and oomph is needed here. Bear shrugged. "If you say so." Now, where to find oomph? Pat, slap, pat, slap, pat, slap. Fox peered down at the pond. He grinned. "Why, Beaver, dear pal, I say, do you like grapes?" "Grapes?" said Beaver. "Oh, yes, indeedy I do." "Excellent. Look and listen. Here's the plan," explained Fox. "Bear stands here. You stand on Bear's head. There. I stand on your tail, and on the count of 3, Bear gives a boost, as you give an oomph, which brings me there, and voila! Grapes." Beaver looked at the plan. He looked at the grapes. He looked at the tree. He tapped his front tooth and thought, "Fox, I'm thinking if I just started chewing on that tree." Ta, interrupted Fox. Beaver, my dentally challenged chum. You just mind the oomphing. Leave all that thinking to me. After all, I'm the fox. Sly, clever, smart. I know how to get grapes. Beaver shrugged. If you say so. Beaver stood here. A bear stood here. Beaver stood on bear's head there. Fox stood on beaver's tail. 1, 2, 3, and no grapes. Fox climbed out of the brambles. Just need an inch or two more. Scooch. Fox measured this. He weighed that. He turned around and grinned. Why, Porcupine, you short scooch of a fellow, do you like grapes? Grapes, said Porcupine. I suppose I do enjoy a grape or two now and then. Excellent. Look and listen. Here's the plan, explained Fox. Bear stands here. Beaver stands there. You stand on Beaver's tail. I stand on you. And on the count of 3, Bear boosts as Beaver oomphs while you scooch, which brings me there. And voila! Grapes. Porcupine looked at the plan. He looked at the grapes. He looked at his back full of quills. Excuse me, Fox, but I have a suggestion. Perhaps if I just point my Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, interrupted Fox. Porcupine, my little friend, let us not get all prickly. You just be a scooch and leave the ideas to me. After all, I'm the fox. Sly, clever, smart. I know how to get grapes. Porcupine shrugged. If you say so. Bear stood here. Beaver stood on Bear's head there. Porcupine stood on Beaver's tail. Fox stood very carefully on Porcupine's back. 1, 2, 3, and no grapes. Fox rubbed his feet. He pulled a bramble from his tail. He uncurled his whiskers. What might be helpful is a wee catch and swing, said Fox with pencil and eraser. Yes, catch and swing should definitely do it. Beaver looked at Bear, who looked at Porcupine. The 3 shrugged. If you say so. Fox spied 2 tiny eyes peeking through a bush. Ah, Possum, my dear. Do you like grapes? Me? Whispered Possum shyly. Why, yes, I do like grapes. Thank you for asking. I like grapes very much. Fox grinned. Excellent. Look and listen. Here's the plan. Bear stands here. Beaver stands on Bear's head there. Porcupine stands on Beaver's tail. I stand on Porcupine. You stand on me. So on and on and on. Etc., etc., etc. Which lifts you, whose tail curls around here, then swings back to me, who I grab, ending up there, and voila! Grapes! Possum stared at the grapes. She stared at the branch. She stared at the plan. Pardon me, said Possum, but it all seems so confusing and complicated. Perhaps if I... Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, interrupted Fox. Possum, 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 my pet. Now, don't worry those few little hairs on your extremely unattractive head. Nothing to fret over and faint dead away. Trust me, my dear. After all, I am the fox. I am the one here who is sly, clever, and smart. I know how to get grapes. Possum blinked. If you say so. So... Isn't that a great picture? Bear stood here, Beaver stood there, Porcupine stood on Beaver's tail, Fox stood carefully on Porcupine, and Possum stood on Fox, ready to swing into action. 1, 2, 3, and boost! Oomph! Scooch! Swing! No grapes. What you doing? Asked Skunk. Blast that bunch of fruit, groused Fox, crawling out from under. There is simply no possible way to get those grapes, and that is that. Possum looked at Porcupine, who looked at Beaver, who looked at Bear. I can run up the tree and toss them down, said Possum. I can aim and shoot them down, said Porcupine. I can cut them down, said Beaver. I can give the tree a shake, said Bear. Fox glared. Oh, really? Then why didn't any one of you say something before? Well, Possum spoke up. After all, you are the fox. Sly, said Porcupine. Clever, said Beaver. Smart, said Bear. Very smart. Fox turned with a huff and a sniff. Well, do as you wish. I, for one, wouldn't think of eating those lousy, rotten, stinking grapes. Now, even if I could, they're probably sour anyway. If you say so. Well, I hope you enjoyed the retelling of Aesop's fable, The Fox and the Grapes, in Lousy, Rotten, Stinkin Grapes by Margie Palatini, illustrated by Barry Moser. I have another story about a little bit unusual food story. And this is from a book called Grandmother Stories, Wise Woman Tales from Many Cultures. These are retold by Burleigh Muten and illustrated by Sian Bailey. And this particular story is called The Old Woman Who Was Not Afraid. This is a Japanese story. Once there was an old woman who didn't have much in the world, just a small garden and an even smaller house. Every day she pounded rice into flour for dumplings. She steamed the dumplings and she sold them for a little money. Everyone loved the old woman's dumplings, as they were the sweetest in town. One day she dropped a whole plate of dumplings, and those little round dumplings rolled right out of the door. They rolled down the path and over the road. They rolled into the woods and kept right on rolling until they bumped into a tree where they stopped. The old woman chased her dumplings into the woods. Just as she bent down to pick up her dumplings, someone reached out and grabbed them and ran off deeper into the woods. "Hey!" yelled the old woman. "That's my supper." She knew that an oni had stolen her dumplings. Everyone in Japan knows that onis are hairy little creatures with horns who live in the woods. They're always hungry and love to eat sweets. Most people leave them alone. But the old woman was so angry she ran after the oni who had stolen her supper. She chased the oni into a hole in the side of a hill that led into a tunnel that went down inside the earth. Suddenly she found herself standing in a large wide cave full of onis. The onis were wildly chewing her dumplings, smiling and laughing and licking their lips with glee. "Who is the cook who made these scrumptious sweet dumplings?" the oni leader asked. The old woman liked to be praised for her dumplings, and for a moment she forgot that the onis had eaten her supper. "I am the cook who made those dumplings," she proudly said. The oni leader bowed to the old woman, and the rest of the onis cheered. When she looked at all those oni licking their lips, the old woman suddenly remembered that they had just eaten her supper. "Yes, I am the one who picked the rice," she said. "I am the one who pounded the rice and patted the flour into round little dumplings, and I am the one who cooked the dumplings for my supper, not yours, and I am still hungry, you rude little thieves." "Oh dear," said the oni leader, and the rest of the onis grew quiet. "Old woman, your dumplings were so scrumptious we quite forgot our manners. Now, will you please be our guest? Will you cook your supper right here in our kitchen?" he asked. "You can make plenty of dumplings, and we will all have dumplings for supper." The onis shouted and cheered for more dumplings. Their voices were loud in the large wide cave, and they rubbed their bellies. "More dumplings! More dumplings!" they yelled. The old woman followed the oni leader to the oni kitchen. "Goodness me," she said to herself. "I am alone in this cave with a whole pack of onis. How will I ever get out of here?" But she was not afraid. "I'll think of something," she said to herself. "I'll find a way to get out of this oni cave." As an underground stream ran through the oni kitchen, the oni leader dipped a bucket into the stream, filling a large pot with water. He put the pot over the fire, then handed the old woman 1 grain of rice. "Put this rice in the water," he said. "You must be joking," said the old woman. "1 grain of rice will not make a meal for a family of mice. If you want dumplings for your whole family, I will need much more rice than this." The oni laughed and picked up a long red spoon with a dragon carved into its handle. He stirred the pot with the long red spoon, and the single grain of rice turned into 10. "Now you try it," he said. The old woman stirred the rice with the long red spoon. The 10 grains of rice turned into 20. She stirred the rice again. The 20 grains of rice turned into 30. Soon the pot was full. "Well, isn't this the perfect spoon?" said the old woman. She made supper for everyone, and while she quietly ate her dumplings, the onis were laughing and talking and stuffing their dumplings into their mouths as if they had not eaten in weeks. Then, as soon as they finished, they shouted for more. Their voices were loud in the large wide cave, but the old woman was not afraid. "Don't they ever stop eating?" she said to herself. "I'll be cooking all day. I'll be cooking all night as long as I'm trapped in this oni cave. But I'll think of something. I'll find a way to get out of this oni cave." She returned to the oni kitchen. This time she filled the pot with water herself. She put 1 grain of rice into the pot and stirred it with the long red spoon. Just as before, the single grain of rice turned into 10. She stirred the rice again. The 10 grains of rice turned into 20, and soon the pot was full. She pounded rice into flour patted the flour into dumplings, and steamed them. Then she served another big batch of dumplings to the Onis. Just as before, they gobbled them up and cheered for more. This time, when the old woman went to the stream to fill the pot with water, she remembered that Onis do not know how to swim. Not only that, Onis do not even travel in boats. If I had a boat, she thought, I could float down this stream. If I could float down this stream, I could find a way to get out of this Oni cave. Then she thought of the big rice pot and made a plan. Now the old woman sang while she put the rice into the pot, and she sang while she stirred the rice with the long red spoon. She sang while she pounded the rice into flour, and she sang while she patted the flour into dumplings. The Onis liked the old woman singing. Her soft voice made them feel very sleepy, and by the time the dumplings were ready to eat, the Onis were sound asleep. The old woman dragged the big rice pot down to the stream and climbed into it, pushing it out into the stream with the long red spoon. But she was so excited she forgot to sing, and the Onis woke up. When they saw the old woman floating down the stream in the rice pot, they began to yell. The whole pack of Onis came running to the stream. "More dumplings! More dumplings!" they shouted. Now there was only one way the Onis could stop the old woman. They bent down on their knees and began to drink up the water in the stream. They slurped and they slurped until their cheeks were bulging with water. The more the Onis slurped up the stream, the smaller the stream became. Soon there was barely any water in the stream. And the old woman's boat slowed down. But she was not afraid. "I will think of something," she said to herself. "I will get out of this Oni cave." Now there was so little water in the stream that fish started jumping into the old woman's boat. She grabbed hold of the fish and she threw them at the Onis. "Fill your bellies with fish," she shouted. And she kept right on paddling with the long red spoon. The hungry little Onis opened their mouths to catch the fish. The stream water gushed out of their mouths and filled up the stream, and the old woman's boat sailed quickly away. "Goodbye, Oni," she shouted. "Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye." Soon she could not see the Onis at all. She sailed along through the rushing stream in the big rice pot. And after a while, the stream flowed through a hole in the cave, right out into the light of day. The old woman climbed out of the pot, took the long red spoon, and ran through the woods to the road and up the path. She ran into her house and slammed the door. Then she started to sing and went straight to work. She filled up a rice pot with water, dropped 1 grain of rice into the pot, and stirred it with the long red spoon. Sure enough, the single grain of rice turned into 10. She stirred again, and sure enough, the 10 grains turned into 20. Soon the pot was full. With the help of the long red spoon, the old woman made enough dumplings each day to feed the whole town. So she opened a restaurant on the porch of her house, and people came from far away to eat her dumplings. The old woman made a lot of money by selling her scrumptious sweet dumplings, and soon she was one of the richest women in all of Japan. Even so, every night after she had closed the restaurant, she walked down to the tree where she had first seen the Oni and left a big plate of dumplings for all the hungry little Onis. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story. The Old Woman Who Was Not Afraid, from the book Grandmother's Stories, Wise Woman Tales from Many Cultures, retold by Burleigh Muten and illustrated by Sian Bailey. Well, those were 2 stories about food that you're not going to hear very often, I'm sure. Library Bear and I hope you enjoyed them, and we hope you enjoyed our Weathersfield Proctor Library Storytime. I'm Glenna Coleman, Youth Services Librarian, and we'll see you next time.